Hello and welcome to our podcast series, Myers-Briggs for Midlife Career Changers. I'm David from editbits.com and I'm the producer of this series. We're going to be discussing the ENTP type today and the unique issues that mid-career ENTPs face. Our expert is Edythe Richards, Myers-Briggs Master Practitioner and founder of A Top Career. We'll begin by giving an overview of ENTPs, delving into the cognitive functions, which are the middle two letters of one's Myers-Briggs type, the strengths and weaknesses of ENTPs, workplace satisfiers, and finally, career paths that other ENTPs have found satisfying. Edythe, let's start with the overview.
Thanks, David. I'm very excited to be talking about ENTPs, and exciting is a word that perfectly describes this Myers-Briggs type. If life's not exciting enough, an ENTP will make it so. It's the nature of ENTPs to be living on the edge of the future, always expecting, frequently achieving, and certainly changing. Following a star that ultimately goes nowhere is often better than being bound by a routine or caught up in some form of dullness or doing something that involves no learning at all.
Now this is going to be interesting. So let's begin with what ENTP stands for.
ENTP stands for extroverted. They project energy outwardly, are action-oriented, meet people regularly, and participate in lots of activities. Intuition. They focus on the general abstract world of possibilities before paying attention to details and sensory information. Thinking. They make decisions based on objective analysis and choose truthfulness before tactfulness. And perceiving. They prefer an adaptable and flexible lifestyle over a structured and planned approach.
It sounds like ENTPs are fun-loving people who can become bored easily. Would you say this is true, Edythe?
Yes, in fact, that's one of the things ENTPs are best known for, and I don't necessarily mean this in a bad way. ENTPs just have this thirst for knowledge, and they're on a constant quest for novelty. They dislike routine, and they thus trust their ability to improvise, though they may procrastinate. They're highly independent types. They'll therefore resist, either overtly or covertly, bureaucratic organizations that infringe on their freedom. One of the worst things for an ENTP is to work for someone who demands that they follow the rules to a T. Rules are frustrating and confining to ENTPs, especially if they're enforced by arbitrary authority. To the outside world, ENTPs may be seen as restless and scattered. For example, they may be reluctant to focus on just one activity or hobby, or even one college major or career path. They see relationships and connections between seemingly unrelated things, and they take advantage of opportunities that others may have missed. They can be very persistent in getting what they want by skirting protocol. Competence is key for ENTPs, and in order to be respected by an ENTP, one must demonstrate competence in his or her position, and this includes teachers and leaders. However, if a person in charge is competent but unstimulating, the ENTP will get bored and procrastinate on his or her work, or will fail to produce work that is a true reflection of their intelligence. And they're typically very intelligent people who really appreciate intellectual discussion and debate. Ultimately, ENTPs will be at their best when they're inspired to overcome challenges in their own way.
This is really interesting. Now, if they are prone to boredom and procrastination, it does make me wonder how successful ultimately ENTPs are. I mean, how does this affect their work ethic?
That's a very relevant point you're bringing up, David. When ENTPs aren't on track, they may go off on pointless tangents looking for stimulation for their hungry intellects. They don't want to miss out on possibilities. So it's sort of like following a sign that says candy store this way. On the way to the candy store, they'll find another sign for a toy store and then an electronics shop, because you never know when an ENTP will find a shortcut to a buried treasure. By the time they're finished investigating all these cool places, they come across the big bad wolf and realize that everyone else is ahead of them, despite the fact that these lesser beings are no more capable than the ENTP. It's at this point the ENTP realizes they should have stuck to the path. It's just that they've had so much fun exploring that they forgot about the original candy store. I'm sure many of our ENTP listeners can relate to this in terms of their careers or even elsewhere in their lives. Like any other type, ENTPs are perfectly capable of achieving goals, but end goals aren't something that comes naturally for them, and this can be frustrating for others who work with ENTPs. On the other hand, too many rules and too much structure is going to make the ENTP depressed. So it's absolutely necessary for ENTPs not to completely shut down their natural tendencies.
Wow, what a description of an ENTP's thought process. I can see why they might need to keep themselves in check, or have others who help them in this regard. Now this is a great place to shift into the cognitive functions for ENTPs. For our listeners, cognitive functions refer to the middle two letters of one's Myers-Briggs type. These are essentially the favourite functions, the ones that we rely on the most. In the case of the ENTP, these are intuition and thinking. So Edythe, what do you have to say about this?
The dominant function for ENTPs is extroverted intuition. Extroverted intuition is an information-gathering process that deals with noticing possibilities in the external world and imagining what could be. This function is about seeing how all things in life are interrelated, and it allows people who use it to see the world in multiple perspectives and make obscure connections. People who use this function have millions of ideas floating around in their heads, but they may have trouble sticking to just one idea, and thus may leave projects unfinished in favor of whatever's new and therefore more appealing. They may also be seen as flighty or unfocused to others, jumping from idea to idea. Similarly, as we've discussed, they can also become bored easily and they can be indecisive. But this function is a charismatic one, and users get excited by possibilities and opening up options when everyone else thinks the options have been exhausted. It's a great function for brainstorming, diagnosing, and an entrepreneurial spirit. But extroverted intuitives prefer to let others fill in the details.
I see. So I'm sensing that ENTPs may talk a lot and brainstorm a lot. I bet they're tireless in the pursuit of their latest goal, as long as their interest in that goal holds. It sounds like life is almost like one big game to them.
It's so true. ENTPs typically view work and even life as one stimulating adventure after another, and they really are fun people with great senses of humor.
How about the auxiliary or secondary function, Edythe?
The auxiliary function for ENTPs is introverted thinking, which is a decision-making process that seeks truth through logical evaluation. Introverted thinkers have an inner world of thought and concentration, and their minds are like busy computers. Users of this function tend to be fascinated by the concept of intelligence, with a performance-based inner drive that can be highly self-critical. This is what drives them towards self-improvement. To onlookers, introverted thinkers are very self-confident and intellectual, and this gives them what they need to accomplish anything they set their minds to. They may seem either uninterested or impatient with people or things that don't fit into this internal framework. Fairness and truth are the guiding principles of introverted thinkers, and they focus on understanding how things work. This includes emotions. Feeling types may therefore see introverted thinkers as devaluing emotions and thus people. One of the gifts of introverted thinkers is detecting the illogic in conventional wisdom, and so we'll often see them playing the devil's advocate.
How do these two functions work together in an ENTP's career development?
ENTPs are often described as clever and visionary, and because of their preference for extroversion, they're characterized primarily by their desire to create this kind of impression on others. With their dominant extroverted intuition, ENTPs will be at their best when they're using this function to learn and gather new information, getting their ideas from the world around them. These ideas usually flow best when they have someone to bounce their ideas off of. But without the balance of introverted intuition, this desire to generate new and interesting results can take precedence over everything else, often at the expense of more practical concerns. This thrill of experimentation is easy for ENTPs to get caught up in. For example, I've known many ENTPs who've had a really hard time graduating from college, not because they're not intelligent or they flunk out, but because they become bored and they want to explore different programs of study. It's therefore vital for ENTPs to develop their auxiliary function of introverted thinking. This function arranges and organizes external data and provides a framework to determine which ideas are logical to pursue and which are not.
Before we get into strategies for this, let's talk about the specific strengths and weaknesses of ENTPs.
As we've already seen, ENTPs are creative and resourceful. Their single greatest contribution to life and work is the creation of ideas, and their ideas flow continuously. They can be described as entrepreneurs who are always sharing or selling their next great idea and attempting to generate enthusiastic support for it. Second, ENTPs are outgoing and enthusiastic. They're friendly and talkative people with a zest for life. Everything is an excuse to engage others. They're clever and amusing, constantly scanning for the new and unusual around them. ENTPs often have diverse interests fed by their idea-generating nature. ENTPs also tend to be logical, with a relentless drive for competency in themselves and others. ENTPs see life as a daily challenge to compete, stretch, share, and learn, always striving for improvement. And finally, ENTPs are spontaneous and easygoing. ENTPs look for fun in all that they do. They tend to see life as one large board upon which the daily game of life is played. The game is never over. There are wins and losses, but mostly it's just one exciting challenge after another. The important thing is the challenge, not the outcome. As a result, ENTPs tend to be good at communicating with enthusiasm and inspiring others to buy their ideas, seeking unique ways of solving problems, and using creativity, public speaking and leading meetings, working with a diverse group of people on a variety of tasks, and detecting flaws in logic and debating issues with conviction.
This is actually reminding me of someone that I worked with in the past. He was brilliant at talking and he loved having an audience. In fact, the more people he was talking to, the more excited he became. His talk centred around theories or ideas that seemed to pop out of nowhere, and they weren't always relevant to the discussion. Yet we couldn't help but be inspired by this guy, because he had such a magnetic personality. Now, some people in our group grew impatient because he would go off on tangents, and they would have to remind him to actually do his work. And I hate to say this, but it was almost like this guy became resentful or passive-aggressive when someone told him to do something. He'd then procrastinate on doing it, or he wouldn't do it the way he was meant to. Does this sound like an ENTP to you, Edythe?
It does, and it's a great segue into our discussion on ENTP weaknesses. ENTPs can be undependable and irresponsible. ENTPs really like their autonomy. Although they like working with people on interesting ideas, they despise being micromanaged, especially by someone they don't respect and trust. They prefer to take on a challenge their own way without the steps being defined for them. And this sounds like what may have been happening with the guy you described. Lack of follow-through is a marked weakness of many ENTPs. Each day can start with a project only to be interrupted by another and still another, leading others to become frustrated with the ENTP because they never know what to expect. Along these lines, ENTPs may have extreme mood swings. ENTPs tend to be extremists at almost everything, and their moods are no exception. Therefore, they have higher highs and lower lows than many other types, and these swings can occur at a moment's notice. They may also have difficulty focusing on the details. As we've seen, when details and deadlines pile up, ENTPs either run away to a new idea or deal with only part of the situation. They then convince themselves that the entire project is finished, and the result is at best a half-done job and at worst a total failure, either of which undermines the ENTP's sense of competency.
I can definitely see this happening. The worker I described, he would come up with solutions to problems, but it did happen when inspiration struck him. It wasn't any established timeline. I think he definitely would have done better if he'd been given just a little more leeway to work on projects his own way.
Right, ENTPs may resist doing things in an established manner and thus tend to dislike routine or repetitive tasks. They're also prone to losing interest in projects when the creative portions are solved. With regards to their interpersonal dealings with others, ENTPs may interrupt others or forget to show appreciation or support. Though they may be charming, ENTPs may also come across as impersonal, pretending to listen to others, or arguing just for the sake of arguing. This can make others wary of engaging with them at any depth. Needless to say, this tendency can also result in some rather unfortunate social and interpersonal consequences.
Ah, I see. Many of the weaknesses you've described, Edythe, can be alleviated by working on balance with the other functions of feeling and sensing. And this is something I know you always advocate for healthy type development. For our ENTP listeners, these are the functions that don't appear in your Myers-Briggs type, but they're still used. It's just not comfortable or natural to do so.
That's right, David. Everyone's developmental needs are going to be different, but many ENTPs will find that developing their feeling and sensing functions will help them to achieve goals more easily, which will ultimately lead to greater personal and professional success. Some strategies that other ENTPs have found helpful: don't take on more projects than you can realistically finish. Boredom is the Achilles heel for many ENTPs, as we've already seen. If you're an ENTP who has trouble with this, try to think about successes that you've had in the past that have made you especially happy. Try to pinpoint exactly what it is about that new idea that attracted you. Is there a career path, for example, that correlates? Don't overlook essential facts and details. Because ENTPs readily see connections and possibilities, they may forget how long a new idea might take to implement in the real world. Deadlines can eventually suffer, or the ENTP can become bored and abandon the projects. As a strategy, setting realistic deadlines rather than timelines, even doubling the amount of time something will take to finish, can help. And speaking of deadlines, learning to be responsible with deadlines and time commitments is something many ENTPs, especially younger ENTPs, may need to work on. Prioritizing which deadlines are most important, don't make promises you can't keep. These are important for ENTP success. Additionally, some ENTPs believe that because they've logically drawn their own conclusions about their fabulous new ideas, they have the perfect answer in any given situation. They may be unappreciative of others or show arrogance or impatience with others who aren't on board with their plans. While on the inside, a great fear of some ENTPs I've known is that they're afraid of failure and may in fact lack confidence. In other situations, ENTPs may experiment on people to see what type of reaction they'll get. They may end up talking over people or arguing with them. As a strategy for our ENTP listeners, even if you can anticipate what others will say, don't talk over them. Instead, acknowledge and validate them and listen with the intent to understand, not to answer. Finally, remember to communicate with the people you care about. Show your appreciation. Though confrontation or conversations about feelings may not seem important to you, they may in fact be very important to others, and they don't have to be scary.
Prudent advice. Let's talk about what this means for careers, which is what I'm sure our ENTP listeners are waiting for. Since ENTPs pride themselves on being independent and intellectual, but also creative and unconventional, I imagine they're going to do best in not only certain roles, but certain work environments. What do you have to say about this, Edythe?
Right, many people tend to be drawn towards careers that make use of their natural preferences. And for ENTPs, they'll be more likely to be energized and therefore satisfied when they're able to use their natural preferences all or most of the time. They'll also be more likely to meet people of like mind in these environments. In order for a career to be satisfying, ENTPs need the opportunity to work on a variety of creative challenges with new and different approaches, a casual yet exciting atmosphere where rules and restrictions are kept to a minimum, plenty of chances to meet influential people and increase their level of personal power, to be recognized, evaluated, and compensated for their creativity, expertise, and competence, and finally, a support staff to whom they can delegate much of the follow-through or the detail management of their work. Before we get into the specific career paths for ENTPs, I'd like to remind our ENTP listeners to bear in mind that none of this is meant to be a stereotype that rules your entire life. You're unique, and though it may take a while for you to get on board with all this personality stuff, this information is meant only as a guideline and an invitation for you to grow.
No need for any of our ENTPs to box themselves in then.
Exactly.
Okay, let's hear about some of the specific career paths that ENTPs have found satisfying.
Careers most often selected by ENTPs fall into 4 general categories: politics, planning and development, marketing, and entrepreneurship. Career paths in this realm include politician, political manager, political analyst, and social scientist. These occupations allow ENTPs to use their ideas, knowledge, and personal sophistication in a highly charged, fast-paced, and powerful arena. ENTPs can easily see trends, themes, and public opinion shifts and adapt to those changes. They're drawn to powerful situations and enjoy meeting a variety of different people. The world of politics requires they meet and establish rapport quickly with those whom they wish to influence. ENTPs often enjoy public speaking, and they can be excellent orators. The next category is planning and development. Specific careers here include strategic planner, personnel systems developer, real estate agent or developer, investment broker, industrial design manager, and computer analyst. These careers require the ability to use one's vision and anticipate trends and formulate creative plans. Developers work on speculative projects, often needing to convince others of their merit and potential for success, an activity ENTPs enjoy and often excel at. Developers also need to be flexible, adapting to new opportunities, ready to put together new deals without much pre-planning or notice. ENTPs also enjoy careers in strategic planning if they're allowed to focus on the development of innovative solutions to problems and can delegate the follow-through to others.
These sound like great fits for ENTPs based on what you've mentioned earlier about how they solve problems. Since they love a challenge and probably tolerate ambiguity well, they'll do best in situations where they can take risks and meet challenges head on.
Yes, and that's also the draw from marketing careers, as long as they're able to work in a versatile and flexible environment. Advertising creative director, marketing researcher or planner, and public relations specialists are careers that fall into this category. These fields allow the ENTP to be involved with other creative people, developing and implementing their ideas often in creative and exciting ways. ENTPs enjoy these fast-paced, sometimes glamorous worlds and are able to use their charm and people skills selling their ideas and concepts. Market research requires ENTPs to use their abilities to spot trends. It also stimulates and satisfies their insatiable curiosity and active imaginations.
And the last category, please, Edythe.
The last category we'll discuss is entrepreneurship. Entrepreneur, actor, management consultant, venture capitalist, literary agent, journalist, owner of a restaurant or bar, and photographer are all careers in this category. Since, as you've probably already surmised, ENTPs are born entrepreneurs, the appeal of these careers to ENTPs is the ability to create a work environment that's new, flexible, and changing. These careers often involve the interaction and participation of many people, creating new concepts and approaches, thinking in innovative ways, and engaging in a certain amount of risk-taking. The projects are often large-scale, requiring the development of big budgets and the participation of powerful and influential people.
What a great list, Edythe. Now, I hope our ENTP listeners have found this content useful, especially if they're looking to make a career change. Remember though, these are only some ideas that provide satisfying expression for the unique and natural talents of the ENTP.
Thanks for that reminder, David. To all the ENTPs out there, your journey through life is a unique one, and you'll have your own challenges, many of which go beyond what the Myers-Briggs or any other assessment measures. This information, again, is only meant to be a guide.
Good to know. Now, is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
The information in this podcast is based on my own knowledge of and experience using the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. I'd like to cite some additional sources for this information, which include Type Talk by Otto Kroger, Do What You Are by Paul Teeger and Barbara Barron-Teeger, and Life Types by Jean Kumaro and Sandra Hirsch.
That's great. Edythe, thanks for your expertise, as always. Now, Edythe is a Myers-Briggs Master Practitioner and Career Counsellor. You can read more about her and listen to more Myers-Briggs podcasts at www.atopcareer.com. My name's David, and I'm the producer of this series. We look forward to having you join us next time.
MBTI and Myers-Briggs are registered trademarks of the MBTI Trust.